The program will now begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual event on the crisis in Tigray, women and girls under violent assault. I'm Milan Verveer, the director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. The situation we are discussing today is alarming. Over the last 6 months, thousands have been killed and hundreds of thousands forced from their homes in the armed conflict that is taking place in the Tigray region in northern Ethiopia. The United Nations estimates that 4.5 million people are in desperate need of critical humanitarian assistance. Women and girls are being brutally targeted. From reports inside Tigray and refugee camps in Sudan, we know that weaponized sexual and gender-based violence is rampant, evoking the worst moments of inhumanity from Bosnia past to the DRC. A few days ago, UN Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Chief Mark Lowcock told the Security Council that sexual violence is being used as a weapon of war. 829 officially reported cases of sexual assault have been noted since the conflict began, but those numbers are considered to be much lower than the terrible reality. Nearly a quarter of reports received by just one agency involve gang rapes with victims as young as 8 years old. Survivors suffer unspeakable crimes, and the nature of the violence also destabilizes entire communities and inflicts lasting harm. UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and related resolutions call on all parties to a conflict to take all measures to protect women and girls from gender-based violence, in particular, rape and all forms of conflict-related sexual abuse. As we will hear shortly, the UN Security Council has yet to act decisively on Tigray. In the face of such brutality, we join with others in asking, how many victims does a conflict need for it to be addressed? How much conflict-related sexual violence can go on without it being addressed? Full and transparent investigation of the abuses is imperative. Protection of the survivors and prevention of further gender-based violence is also imperative. In 2018, we at the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security published an important report calling on the United Nations Security Council to use sanctions to prevent and curb sexual violence in armed conflict. Sanctions for conflict-related sexual violence need to be better utilized and more effectively. Moreover, ending the impunity for these crimes must be a top priority. Wherever they occur, perpetrators are rarely brought to justice. We want to thank those who are bravely speaking out. You will shortly hear some of their accounts of what has been happening in Tigray. Some of what you will hear may be difficult, but we believe it imperative that these accounts are made public as government officials are making efforts to suppress the flow of information on what is happening in Tigray. Some from whom you will hear traveled miles to record their stories. Others have reached out to those still in Tigray to ensure that they convey rightly their calls for action. Others wish to join, but because of the serious security risks, were not able. Today, we welcome over 800 attendees on Zoom from over 100 countries. The program is also being broadcast live on our Facebook page, and we anticipate hundreds more to be joining via Facebook. This program is being recorded and will be available on our website at the conclusion of the program. The video you are about to see is the story of one woman in Tigray. Her story is one of many, and for security reasons, the name, and the location are not being divulged. Can we see the video, please?
ናብዚ ንምምፃእ ኩሉ ነገር ተወክስታት ገለ ስለ ዝነበረ በቲ ዘለዎ ሓደጋ ዝተፈጠረ ምህዳም እዩ ካብቲ ዝሃደምናሉ ከዓኒ እንዳመፃና ኣብዚ ናይ ዓዲ ወርሾ ከባቢ ሩባታት ገለ መለሎ ሓወታት እዩ ሓሙሽተ ኢና ካብ ሓሙሽተና ግን ክልተ ኢና ተደፊርና ሰለስተ እየን ከዓኒ እቲኣ ጥንስቲ ስለዘን እቲኣ ኣደ ቆልዓ እያ ማይተን ከፍ ኾነ ንዓና ግን በትሪ ማይ ስተያ ይሰትን በላ ንዕና ኣብዚ ብልዓ ዝብላዕ ንሄክን ኣይንበልዕን ብማለት እንታይ ኾንክ ዘይተላ እንታይ ኾንክ ዘይሰታ ኢሎም ብበትሪ ብምውቃዕ ንዓይ ብጎኒ ምውቃዕ እግረይን ብሓዊ ብምልላዕ ደፊሮምና ማለት እዩ ተደፊርና ካብኡ ትደለኦ ቦታ ንገራና ብማለት ኣንሕና ንዓዲ ጎሽ ኢና ዓዲ ጎሽ ደኣ እንታይ ኣለክን ትኸድኦ ካደ ካልእ የብልና በላ ማኪና ፀውዕና ንክን ኣለና ብማኪና ጌርክን ትኸዳ أحلفهم كعدوش بهاد أحلفهم زمان بعنجت قال أنا تقدر تعدي أو دولنا خيرا بقدرنا خانة مراتنا
شو توم لتدفر لك أنا استيو كالما بيت هنتات لنور تجارو تهنا استيوم تدفير النيل بحرمه أو سخط أكتر من يبتدفاري الدفر كأكل تفضيه بزعم خندينيو
نعم عايز حازنا سلسلة هذا حزن لي قال له كأوتي خان أنا حزني ما تقول سلسلة حزبنا سلسلة أقرنا حزو أقرا حزن لي قال له أنا حزني بيت حدا خيره كأقرن تم خمس بهذا لا أنا ندعي بيان ساعتواتي أنزيهم عتواتي عطواتي محمداوي بمثل كلام مخدينا كاوغاني مزحاتي أمكاني عم حرني عن زارو توصل قاسي لك درني رمو
هذه أوها معنا تنات عنه مثلا مرة خدمي خدم
أو تنار ميرا أجاب سنة ستهايلا تنسجن حس تنست أخذ تعاهدا دكتور مع اللي هو قناة حجة سبوع
That video represents the context for our discussion today and what is happening in Tigray. It is now my honor to welcome Undersecretary General Pramila Patten, the UN's Special Representative on Sexual Violence and Conflict. She has been a leading voice calling for action to address the violence in Tigray. A few days ago, in the Security Council's open debate on sexual violence and conflict, the Special Representative reminded the world that this scourge continues and that we are not doing enough to end it. We are very grateful that she's taken the time to be with us today. Pramila, we are eager to hear from you, and I know that you will help us better understand the impact of what is happening in Tigray, and we thank you so much for your tremendous leadership.
Ambassador Revere, thank you for the invitation to this important and timely event. We meet at a time when conflict-related sexual violence as a crime should have been consigned to a closed chapter of history, but it is unfortunately once again in the headlines. In the remote mountainous regions of North and Central Tigray, women and girls are being subjected to sexual violence with a level of cruelty beyond comprehension. Healthcare workers are documenting new cases of rape and gang rape daily, despite their own fear of reprisals and attacks on the limited shelters and clinics still in operation. My office has been following the situation in Tigray since November 2020, and since then I have been extremely concerned by the numerous and horrific reports received from multiple and credible sources about the extent and cruelty of acts of sexual violence being committed against women and girls. Images of the brutality of the violence and terror being inflicted on women and girls have sent shockwaves around the world. Testimonies of some brave survivors revealed the brutal and hideous war being waged on the bodies of women and girls. On the 21st of January 2021, I issued a statement calling for restraint in the early stages of these hostilities and urged all parties involved in the fighting to adhere to a zero-tolerance policy for crimes of sexual violence. I also called for humanitarian actors and human rights investigators to be granted access to affected areas and population. More recently, as more humanitarian actors, service providers, assessment teams, and journalists have been allowed into the regions, horrific stories of sexual violence are emerging. Stories of men in uniform using rape and gang rape systematically, holding women and girls captive for days and repeatedly assaulting them, targeting young girls and pregnant women, forcing family members to watch their mothers, daughters, wives, and sisters being brutally violated. It is true that due to communication blackouts, insecurity, and restrictions on access, it has been difficult for the UN to verify all these accounts. But it is my position that we cannot sit idle waiting for verification and ignore these multiple accounts of sexual atrocities. After all, these reports may only be the tip of the iceberg, as sexual violence always chronically underreported. In its report of 11th of February, in which it had documented 108 rapes reported in health facilities, the Ethiopia Human Rights Commission itself stressed that the number of sexual violence incidents are likely to be higher and more widespread, given the destruction of local structures where survivors could have reported cases, such as police and health facilities. Neither can we overlook all the signs that point to the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. Service providers are signaling an increased demand for sexual and reproductive health services, particularly emergency contraceptives, abortions, and HIV prevention drugs, as well as increased requests for psychological and mental health support to deal with trauma resulting from sexual violence. These are indicators of sexual violence being deployed on a large scale. There are also credible reports of the targeting of health facilities and shelters for survivors, and threats against medical personnel and journalists documenting sexual violence. These are indeed patterns and trends that we often see in conflict zones where sexual violence is widespread and systematic. Therefore, we must view and address them as the critical warning signals that they are. Ladies and gentlemen, what is clear is that the conflict is not over and the humanitarian situation is deteriorating rapidly. Improvement in access and a reduction in conflict and atrocities have at best been temporary and sporadic. Without a ceasefire, this already grave humanitarian crisis is only going to get worse. Since January, I have engaged with the Ethiopian authorities on the need to prevent and respond to conflict-related sexual violence, and I have had meetings with the permanent representative to the UN, the president of Ethiopia, the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, and the Minister of Women, Children and Youth Affairs. I must say that I'm encouraged by the acknowledgement of reports of sexual violence at the highest levels of government. This is a first critical step to addressing the problem. The Minister of Women, Children and Youth Affairs has confirmed the critical needs of survivors and called for support from the international community. And in this regard, my office is currently working together with the minister on the development of a framework of cooperation which will identify areas for UN intervention and support to the national authorities. The elaboration and signing of this agreement is a priority for my office as I put the two operational arms of my mandate, namely the United Nations team of experts on the rule of law and the UN Action Network, at the disposal of the Ethiopian authorities. The team of experts supports affected members to strengthen prevention and response to sexual violence through enhancing the rule of law and strengthening institutional safeguards against impunity at the national level. Whilst UN Action Network, which I chair and comprise of 19 UN entities, is the main coordination forum for the UN's work on prevention and response to conflict-related sexual violence. I must add that I also made an offer of technical support to the Ethiopia Human Rights Commission, including training of its investigators on documentation, collection of evidence, and investigation of conflict-related sexual violence cases. I also propose an MOU with my office to include the participation of my team of experts in the joint investigation with OHCHR. Unfortunately, up to now, no due consideration has been given to my office. With regard to the joint investigation into all human rights violations, I just want to add that although it is a welcome development and a crucial step in the fight against impunity, it is absolutely critical that it be conducted in a timely manner. Time is of the essence before the evidence trail goes cold. It is therefore desirable that the terms of reference be promptly finalized, that the joint team deployed without further delay, and have full and unimpeded access throughout the Tigray region in the conduct of the investigation. It may be many months before we know the full scale and magnitude, the extent and impact of these atrocities. For my part, I will continue to amplify the call, firstly for all parties to the conflict to respect international humanitarian and human rights law and end hostilities. Secondly, the need for a scaling up of resources and humanitarian assistance throughout Tigray, including the provision of comprehensive medical and psychosocial care with critical life-saving services made available to survivors of sexual violence within 72 hours following the attack. Emergency contraception and post-exposure prophylaxis are to be most effective. The prevention of and response to conflict-related sexual violence require a collective effort and sustained political and financial support from the entire international community. The security has for sure adopted groundbreaking resolutions to combat sexual violence in conflict. Last Wednesday, at the annual open debate on sexual violence in conflict, I asked one question to members of the council. What do these resolutions mean right now on the ground in Tigray? When history looks back on this painful episode as part of the long litany of battles fought on the bodies of women and girls from Bosnia to Rwanda, Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere, we will rightly be asked, what did we do to honor our commitments? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Special Representative. And those indeed are the questions. And that is the challenge to all of us as well in terms of what we need to do. I can't thank you enough for all of us for your tremendous leadership, for giving us today the context of what is happening and the work that you are continuing to do. So Godspeed. We know that you'll keep at it. Thanks so much. We are now fortunate to hear from Ambassador Geraldine Byrne-Nason, the permanent representative of Ireland to the United Nations. She is a key advocate in the Security Council for an end to the violence in Tigray. She has always been a committed, consistent voice on behalf of women and girls, and it is no surprise that she is effectively engaged on this issue today. So Ambassador Geraldine, thank you too so much for being with us and for your leadership, Ireland's leadership in the Security Council on this issue.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning, Milan. I'm grateful to be invited to join you this morning. As you know, I'm a great admirer of the work that the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security does, especially on bridging the gaps between those of us, the practitioners, some of us on the Security Council, academia and civil society, it's a very valuable opportunity. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk again today about what's happening in Tigray, specifically to women and girls. Frankly, we need to keep this issue high up at the top of our agenda. Before I start, I want to say that Ethiopia is one of Ireland's most long-standing and closest partners in Africa. We value that partnership. We have the interests of the Ethiopian people on the ground absolutely to the forefront in everything we do as a newly elected member of the Security Council. We understand the depth of humanitarian need on the ground, of the development challenges, and indeed this week have increased our support to Ethiopia to address those challenges. So it's in that constructive spirit I'm speaking to you here this morning. I want to salute the extraordinary courage and resilience of the survivor we heard from just now, and I know we'll hear more later on. That's what reminds us of why we're doing what we do on a daily basis. As we are on our fourth month, we're newly elected, as I said, at the Security Council. I've become particularly aware, painfully aware, I could say, that the experience of women and girls in conflict is all too often sidelined or indeed dismissed as somehow peripheral to the primary concern of ending violence. And clearly, this applies generally, but couldn't be further from the truth when we look at the deeply distressing situation in Tigray. I think that facing up to the sexual and gender-based violence committed against women and girls in Tigray is intrinsic to understanding the overall dynamic of the crisis. Ireland certainly shares the concerns we've just heard so eloquently expressed by Pramila Patten, the Special Representative. She has been sounding the alarm on this issue for months, and again powerfully last week at the Security Council in open public debate, speaking about the horrific levels of sexual violence that women and girls are being subjected to. And I want to thank her for her courageous leadership on this issue in relation to Tigray. Pramila has spoken of atrocities against women and girls. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has said that war crimes and crimes against humanity may have been committed. These are shocking abuses that are occurring at a magnitude that suggests they could be systematic and widespread, of course. Many of you in the audience will have read, watched, listened to shocking reports from other sources. As we work with the Ethiopian government to help emerge from this crisis, we cannot allow ourselves to turn away from painful realities. Ireland has used its voice as an elected member at the Council to call for these and other violations to cease immediately and to address the deteriorating humanitarian situation. Our concern is for the people of Ethiopia, for the people of Tigray. Since we took up our seat in January, twice we have convened discussion at the Security Council on Ethiopia in a format that's known as an AOB point. It's a technical issue. Ethiopia is not formally an item on the agenda of the Council, but yet we felt it was vitally important to pursue the discussions as a means to ensure that the Council had an opportunity to discuss, to shine a light on the situation. But I also want to underline as a means to encourage and support the Ethiopian government in addressing what is a complex crisis on the ground. And last week, we welcomed a call by the United States for another AOB point, and we're working very closely now on advancing that discussion. In those discussions, Ireland and the other Council members have made it clear our condemnation of the violence against women and girls, and we've called for humanitarian access, including, importantly, to enable the provision of life-saving services to victims and survivors. Of course, we recognized and welcomed steps taken by the Ethiopian authorities on facilitating access, but the fact is more must be done. The situation in Tigray was also the focus, as Pramila just referred there, to the Security Council's annual open debate on conflict-related sexual violence, during which Ireland and several other members at the Council table put our concerns on record. Ireland firmly believes that the Council should speak publicly and with one voice on the situation in Ethiopia. We are continuing to work with all of our colleagues around the table with that in mind. The Council's voice can be a vital support in helping to end this crisis for the benefit in Ethiopia, the benefit of Ethiopia and its people. Our silence until now is deafening and isn't helping the situation on the ground. We believe we must live up to our responsibilities. So for us to do that, I'll make just three remarks about urgent, immediate steps we see as being helpful in that regard. First, of course, we need to see an end to the hostilities and an end to the violent assault on women and girls. Second, we need to see unhindered humanitarian access, including the provision of those life-saving services for victims and survivors. Prime Minister Abiy of Ethiopia has committed to providing unfettered access for humanitarian support. We welcome that. We need to see it implemented on the ground and urgently. We also then have a firm view that the pursuit of accountability for human rights abuses is critical, not least for sexual violence. Prime Minister Abiy has also recognized the need for this. So if I can conclude, Milan, just on a more general point on accountability, that's a signature for Ireland as we work on the Security Council. That is for all atrocities, no matter where they take place in the globe against women and girls, should end in accountability. Regrettably, world over, impunity for sexual and gender-based violence has been a hallmark of armed conflict, and we want to see an end to that. All perpetrators of these crimes against women and girls, including in Tigray, must be brought to justice, whatever their affiliation. As I said earlier, the Ethiopian authorities have committed to this, and that is welcome, very welcome. The recently announced joint investigation by the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission into human rights violations must include investigation of sexual violence, and it's vital that they receive unfettered access and be allowed to work in a fully independent way. So I'll conclude on that by thanking you again, Milan, and to reassure all who are listening that we will continue to work hard and constructively to make a difference on this issue as we go about our work on a daily basis at the Security Council. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Geraldine Byrne-Nason, for that very powerful statement, for your leadership. I can't think of two better people, yourself and Pramila, obviously, in helping us understand what is happening at the United Nations, what you're hearing, what you're trying to do, and giving us our marching orders as well in terms of what needs to be done. So thank you so much. I know you've got a Security Council meeting in session right now, but we're glad you could come by and help us understand all of this better. So thank you again. We're going to turn now to Fane Solomon, who is a social worker and specialist support coordinator supporting the Women's Association of Tigray. She's a member of the Tigrayan diaspora. She has observed over several visits to Tigray the daily struggle of women and girls and the lack of institutional support for them. She also learned that there were limited services available for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. Working with others, she led the way in creating the first one-stop center in Mekelle for survivors. The center is serving survivors today and has been an invaluable resource during this terrible war. So Fane, we're so pleased to have you with us. I know you are in direct contact with people on the ground in Tigray. Let me begin by asking you, from your contacts with the Safe House, what is happening to women and girls there as we speak?
Thank you so much for inviting me to this important platform so I could be a voice for the women in Tigray that are suffering today. So the situation in Tigray is grave, and I could say it's almost out of control. The women in Tigray today face shocking forms of sexual violence, which I personally believe are deployed systematically to hurt the women in Tigray, to destabilize the region, not only for now, but for generations to come. Human rights violations is one of the main issues women and girls are facing today in Tigray. Today, there is no safe place for women in Tigray. They are being raped in their own home, in their neighborhood, in their workplace, on their way to the shop. When I say there is no safe place for these women and they are all at risk of sexual violence, this statement is not exaggerated. This is a horrific reality on the ground. This is a testimony and the feeling of many women. Women are raped and horrific harms are inflicted upon them. The type of harm are beyond imaginable and horrific. One woman reported that soldiers, after taking turn raping her for days, they later on decided to insert a heated metal rod inside of her. A heated metal rod inside of her. While doing that, they were telling her they were doing that to make sure that she will not give birth to any children. They were making sure that no women in Tigray are able to give birth to children because they grow up being enemies that they have to fight later on. Other women have confessed that they've been prevented from seeking medical support for days. The intention was to give them HIV. They reported that these soldiers said to them, they are handpicked because they have HIV and they are here to infect the women so they later on can infect everybody in the community. But most importantly, to make sure that they will not give birth to healthy children. Others have been told their blood is being cleansed. The Tigrayan tribe is problematic and that needs to be taken care of now. Women are gang raped to a point of being paralyzed, and fistula has become a big issue. Men are forced to rape their family members. They are forced to watch while their sisters and daughters and mothers are being raped. Women are abducted from their home to soldier camps, held hostage for days, gang raped, physically abused by these soldiers. These women in Tigray are not only being humiliated, traumatized, but they are losing their lives, their arms, their legs, trying to protect themselves from these soldiers. These women have seen their sons, husbands, brothers, and fathers being shot in front of them, trying to protect them, and then later on raped next to the dead bodies of their fathers, brothers, sons, and husbands. This rape is not only affecting these women that are being raped, it's affecting their families, their husbands, their children, their fathers. One father tied up in a chair, forced to watch while they were raping his daughter. The father later on took his daughter to the clinic so she could get medical support. He was heartbroken, traumatized, shocked, and devastated. The women on the ground described this to be the most horrible and heartbreaking thing that they have experienced during their career. It's also affecting children. Children are left home alone with no one to care for them because their mothers or sisters or the women have been abducted from the house. One incident, a young girl fleeing to Adwa after both of her parents being killed by the Eritrean soldiers. On her way there, the soldiers took her for 3 days and left the children behind. Still today, no one knows where these children are. Are they alive, dead? Has someone taken them? Nothing. Their whereabouts is not known. Husbands forced to pay money to free the wife that was held hostage for 10 days with her 2-month-old baby. She was only allowed to feed her once a day. The rest, all she could hear was her crying from far. And these are the horrific incidents that are happening in Tigray, not only to these women, but to their families and everyone involved, to the whole society of Tigray. This is the
Lane, thank you for bringing us those messages from the ground in terms of what's happening to the people there. It's just unimaginable inhumanity. Do they feel protected in any way? What are you hearing from the workers and some of the survivors? Is there any protection?
There is no protection because there is no law and order. There is no justice. They have no one to go and report to. The only thing they are reporting is only to get medical support. But as for getting any support, any protection, that's not possible at the moment. Even safe houses are not safe places at the moment, because a safe house that's meant to be a shelter for them, a safe place for them, have been ransacked and searched by soldiers. Women have been raped not only once or twice, they've been raped 3-4 times with no one to be able to protect them. Women have been taken and held hostage for days, several times from their own home, with no one else to be able to support them. There was one incident where this woman was pushed out of her house and they were raping her daughter that was 4 months pregnant at a time. She screamed and went out and asked for support from the soldiers that were outside, but there was no support. All they said was, "What are you crying for? What did you think we are here for?" So as for the protection, there is no protection at all, non-existent at the moment.
So what can be done to provide support? What are they telling you that they need most at this moment?
Well, the challenges, if we talk about the challenges at the moment, are that women and children in this affected area are reporting of significant challenges to access health or social welfare or any justice. The service, the facilities, the hospitals are non-existent, which makes it very difficult for them to report on timely manner, which results to unwanted pregnancy. They're exposed to STI, including HIV and fistula. But some of the women are also trying to access services, have to walk very far because there's no services nearby. And trying to get to this destination to report rape, these women are raped 3 to 4 times before there is the destination. And the facilities are not able to respond to the demand that the situation is requiring. And the other challenge is also many survivors come in there and report. They're also saying that there are many women left behind. There are many women still held hostage, but no workers are able to go and support or save these women that are supposedly left behind. Lack of trust of the interim government, which prevents many women from reporting because there is no protection. They're scared. Fear of the threat from soldiers that would tell them that they will come back and kill their families, and they will come back and take them again. And also fear of stigma. Many women are scared that their husbands and their families would know what has actually happened to them. Many women will come and confess that their worst fear is for their husband to find out what has actually happened to them. And many are not reporting in fear of that their husbands would leave them if they found out that this is what's happening to them. So as for what needs to be done, after looking at those challenges, that the targeted attacks against civilians, including rape and other horrific forms of sexual violence, must stop. And all the state and non-state parties has to fulfill their obligation under the international human rights law. And they have to make sure that these women and children are protected from human rights abuses. And everyone has to condemn all the sexual violence that's taking action. And those who is carrying out this crime has to be brought to justice. The security issue needs to be solved. Making sure government takes responsibility and is accountable, since all these crimes are being carried out by the Eritrean and Ethiopian soldiers that they have sent to Tigray. they must condemn and stop using rape as a weapon of the war. There has to be a safe way to access services. Protect these women, ensure that there are no soldiers nearby any shelters, so there is no further harm inflicted on these women. Women have come back and told workers on the ground that they have been physically abused because the soldiers have found out that they have reported the rape. And the house have been searched. And the other problem is also that the one-stop center and the Ida hospital is guarded by soldiers, which prevents women from coming and reporting in fear that if these soldiers saw them there, they will tell the others and they will lose their families and they will be raped again. So it's important that these spaces are free from these soldiers, since most of these women that are coming into these facilities are women that have been raped by these soldiers. And international community should take action to make the government accountable for all these atrocities that's happening in Tigray to these women and children. Advocacy is also very important. Advocacy from a powerful government, advocacy from powerful individuals. Everyone has to come out and be a voice for the women in Tigray, because the atrocity and the horrific sexual violence that's taking place there is horrendous. And the world has to open their eyes. We cannot make the same mistake as everywhere else previously. This is 2021 and we have to do better. And capacity of service providers in terms of technical knowledge and skills to treat survivors, and also provide supplies like dignity kits, post-rape treatments, and also expansion of safe houses and one-stop center. The facilities that are there now are not enough for the demands and for the horrific rape that's happening in Tigray. The other problem is documentation. It's not being documented properly. Documentation of rape cases through GBV information system should be in place for proper documentation of data. These reports have to be documented by a trusted body, since there is no trust between the government and Addis Ababa, including the interim government in Tigray. Many fear that they're trying to destroy evidence, they're trying to destroy report that has already been reported. So there is no trust for these people on the ground to be able to work with the interim government or the federal government. So but I will end this though by saying that although we appreciate the concerns of the international communities, other powerful individuals and governments, it's important that they know and understand that they cannot stop the rape and atrocity taking place in Tigray by only stating they are concerned, they are very concerned, or that they are extremely concerned. They must take action now. Tigray cannot wait. What's happening on the ground is beyond what we can ever imagine. It's also important to keep in mind that the issue in Tigray does not only need humanitarian solution, but it also needs political solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fane. Thank you for telling us all of this. I'm sure it's going to stay with us and motivate us for the call to action. You're exactly right. Statements are not enough. We need action. And the people of Tigray, whom you've just described in terms of what they're going through, certainly speak volumes. So thank you for all that you're doing, and stay in touch with us on what you're continuing to hear and learn. We're going to turn now to two workers in the refugee camp in Sudan, which is just over the border from Tigray. We've asked them to share what they are hearing from women and girls who've escaped to Sudan. They both went through enormous lengths to record these statements and to ensure that they could bring them to us, and through these statements to bring us the voices of Tigrayan women and girls. So first, we're going to hear briefly from Dr. Tefera Tedros, a surgeon who fled to Sudan from Tigray. He's been serving families in a refugee camp since the beginning of the war. As a doctor in the camp's 2 small clinics, he's been providing medical care services to thousands of Tigrayans every day. He listens to the victims of the war crimes, sharing their accounts to him of sexual and gender-based violence. And he, one person, is serving as surgeon, family practitioner, nurse, counselor, and translator. So we're about to see this video, which is courtesy of CNN, with Dr. Tedros speaking with a survivor, and the CNN correspondent is Nina El-Bagir. The video, please.
He pushed me and said, "You Tigrayans have no history. You have no culture. I can do what I want to you and no one cares."
What brought you to the clinic here today?
I haven't told anyone, but I've been thinking that I'm pregnant from the rape. So I came to check and I discovered I am.
And Dr. Tedros says that of the cases that are actually reported to him, like that young lady, maybe less than 10. But the cases that he suspects, based on the injuries that they present with, he thinks that just here in Hamdayet, they could be potentially in the thousands. And he believes that this isn't just about ill discipline, as horrible as that is, that this is part of a campaign that's being intentionally waged against the women of Tigray. This is what he told us, Jake.
The women that have been raped say that the things that they say to them when they were raping them is that they need to change their identity, to either Amharanize them or at least leave their Tigrinya status, and then they've come there to cleanse them.
Cleanse the bloodline?
Cleanse the bloodline, and then get them that they are different.
We're now going to hear from Dr. Muga Katir. She's a gender activist in Sudan. She was recently working with an NGO focused on empowering refugees in the camps, working with Tigrayan women. She's dedicated to building the capacities of women through economic empowerment initiatives and so much more. Can we have the video, please?
They are facing many risks because you know that the war itself is a risk. Looting, losing their life, even there, before they are escaping, you know, that the thing that happened to them before they are arriving, they are all risk factors. Some of them, they came on foot. It's another risk factors because it's a long way, starvation, heart condition during the journey, many other things that it's considered as a risk for those women. Some of women, they are having kids and they lost their kids during their journey because of illness and other stuff, and it's very long. And some were already ill, and some are pregnant. They miscarried, and they lost their babies. So these are all risk factors. After arriving, there are other risk factors like trafficking, because they might expose to trafficking people. Other things like exchanging food for sex and other kind of abuse. There is a lot of things should be done. A lot of things should be provided to them. They need first of all protection. They need protection because it's very important. They already fled from the war, so they have to find at least safe and dignity here.
We're now going to go to Ethiopia to hear from 2 members of CARE in Ethiopia. CARE is working on the ground in Tigray on gender-based violence and is leading one of the leading organizations championing progress for women and girls. As we know, they do so well around the world. First, I'm happy to welcome Mekon Afewerk, the advisor for gender in emergencies with CARE Ethiopia. She leads the development and implementation of women's empowerment strategies for all the emergency unit programming and coordinates CARE Ethiopia's emergency teams' gender strategies and approaches across their humanitarian programming. Mekon, what is happening from where you sit with CARE in Ethiopia? What are you seeing in terms of gender-based violence in Tigray? And I know you've authored a whole study on rapid gender analysis. What can we learn from the process that you've used?
Okay, thank you. Well, like as you mentioned, we were actually, we had the opportunity to conduct a couple of rapid gender analyses in different areas within the Tigray region, as well as bordering areas, Amhara regional states bordering areas, with, I would say, the past couple of months. The findings that are observed in terms of sexual and gender-based violence are somehow relatively similar to what Fanai earlier has mentioned, but just to go through some of the findings from our analysis, the conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence and atrocities actually include rape, attempted rape, as well as abduction, attacks, and like physical attacks while trying to flee for safety. And one of the areas where we conducted this rapid gender analysis, we came across a collective shelter, a collective internally displaced population shelter, like an IDP shelter, where we met actually a number of women and girls who have explained quite a number of issues that they have faced while traveling for safety and shelter. Among this, as I mentioned, there are still reports of missing children who couldn't reunite with their families and guardians. Moreover, there are rape and attempted rapes that are being committed on these women and girls at the same time fleeing for safety, of course. There are reports of sexual harassment and assault, but what makes this crisis or war a bit different and quite devastating from our previous experience would be the almost, I would say, like the complete lack of presence of these health facilities. Previously, this kind of incident, like when this kind of incidents occur, a woman will be able to go at least to a nearby neighborhood to secure access and service to gender-based violence-related issues. But now, the entire government structure, I would say at this point, is collapsed, starting from the Women and Children's Affairs Office, where they prime like an institute or a frontline institute who handles this kind of matters. The health facilities are destroyed. There is no police presence in the field. And moreover, there is also, I would say, no rule of law or more of the legal service. So where these situations, these kind of situations are happening, it's actually quite difficult for a person or for a survivor to get a comprehensive kind of gender-based violence service and response later on. So eventually there are actually increasing reports of negative coping strategies, such as exchanging sex for service or goods or protection and safety and so forth. So these are, I would say, some of the problems and the issues highlighted in the assessments that we've conducted in these multiple locations, both within the region and in nearby bordering areas. Yeah.
Give us a sense of how the humanitarian organizations are working in a holistic way to help the women and girls.
Well, like if I'm speaking for the humanitarian organizations in general, of course, there is an already established cluster level coordination for GBV actors and GBV and protection actors, both here in Addis as well as in Tigray, in Mekelle specifically. There is the coordination. But in terms of response, I would say maybe later on my colleague Esther might address some of these issues. Due to lack of funding, specifically for this GBV matters, I wouldn't say there is enough response, but probably from CARE's perspective, I can maybe speak for CARE. What we've been doing the past 4 or 5 months mainly focuses on provision of dignity kits, hygiene and dignity kits for women and girls in reproductive age, because while this crisis and conflict has been happening, there were hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced from their localities and currently sheltering in collective shelters. So we were able to provide that assistance to women and girls in reproductive age. Moreover, we were also able to work with government actors where there is a relatively, I would say, like safer security presence. So we also had a chance to work with government partners, mainly Women and Children's Affairs Office and health care providers, in capacity building, mainly giving them trainings on comprehensive kind of GBV response, clinical management of rape. And we do also have activities that we have planned on pipeline to provide psychosocial first aid support for victims of, survivors of GBV as well as survivors of war-related trauma. And moreover, provision of post-rape treatments, like mostly this medical supplies to, and like any actually existing health facilities who can be providing kind of GBV referral support and services for survivors. Yeah, that's what we have been engaged on the past few months.
Well, thank you so much, Mekone. I know there's plenty to do, and we're glad you could share some of that with us today. I want to turn to your colleague now, Esther Watts, who's CARE's Ethiopia country director, where she is spearheading numerous programs focused on the empowerment of women and girls and leads the design and implementation, monitoring, evaluation, research, and so much more that goes into the work that is done, and has many years experience working on these issues in Ethiopia. So Esther, give us a further sense of what the humanitarian organizations are facing. Do you have humanitarian access into Tigray or in ways to support the women coming out of Tigray? What are some of the medical needs or other kinds of supplies that are needed? And where are the serious gaps right now?
So good afternoon, Ambassador, and thank you again for the opportunity to join the panel. From our perspective, there are kind of maybe 4 or 5 key areas of challenge that we're facing operating in Tigray at the moment. And the first, as you have alluded to, is access. And I think the key word that Ambassador used previously was unfettered access. So we do have access, we can operate, but it is a huge challenge. So in Tigray at the moment, there are up to 5 different military operators, 5 different military operators functioning across Tigray. So depending on where you are working and in which geography you are working, you may have to deal with maybe 2 or 3 different military commanders. And therefore, negotiating that access depends on establishing relationships and ensuring that your staff are safe and that they are secure when you are traveling, and having clear and up-to-date security information, which is very difficult because communications are very, very difficult in Tigray at the moment. You may not have phone access. It's hard to have other forms of communication. So having up-to-date security information in order to operate is very, very difficult. So for an example, this last week, we have had 2 huge food trucks waiting in Tigray to move that we have been unable to because of active conflict going on and roads being closed. So the key word is unfettered access. We do have access and we can operate, but the issue is if there is active conflict ongoing, then it's very, very hard to gain that access. And it's also very dependent on the individual commanders of who you're negotiating with as to whether or not you can actually get to where you need to go to, or maybe you can get to halfway through, but then you have to wait and you have to then move on. So access is definitely a key issue. Second is funding, and particularly if we're talking about GBV, and Macron has alluded to this. So, and there are huge gaps in funding at the moment. There are huge needs across Tigray, and not just across Tigray. If you look at Ethiopia as a whole, there are also other huge issues going on. And the humanitarian requirements document has huge gaps in it, and particularly for Tigray. So when it comes to prioritization of funding, quite often GBV funding is put below what is termed life-saving. And for me, the key issue here is if we're talking about these atrocities and we're talking about systemic rape, how is that not considered life-saving? And therefore, there should be similar allocations of funding for direct GBV response in the same way there is for a health response, in the same way that there is for a food response, in the same way that there is for an ag response. And currently, funding for direct service provision around GBV is very, very limited. And as you've heard, both Fanai and Macron reference, it's very, very hard to provide services because the health system is decimated. So then we come on to another key challenge around the health system. The health system is decimated, especially if you go out into the rural areas. We've conducted assessments and spent time talking with women and girls, and we're operating in 21 wards. And in a lot of those locations, there is no health centre anymore. There's no medicines in the health centres, and there are no health workers. One of the key issues is around the health workers. Health workers haven't been paid. They haven't been paid for maybe 3 months, 4 months. I think there is beginning to be payment from the government sources, but also there is huge fear around their own security. So if we're going to have a health system response and we're going to have referral systems for GBV, then we need to re-establish those on-the-ground health systems. And then fourthly, restoration of basic services. Again, if we're going to work, the issues around restoration of electricity, issues around restoration of the banking services. When we were in Tigray, and we have a very large ag livelihoods program, and we work with many, many women in what we call village savings and loans associations. And many of them have lost all of their assets, and they aren't able to access the money that they have had in banking systems. And where the banks are open, there are queues miles long, like literally a mile long. So restoration of basic services is absolutely critical. And then finally, from CARE's perspective, one of the key issues in the humanitarian sector is lack of women leadership. And I'm delighted to see on this panel all these amazing, strong women leaders who are advocating for gender justice. However, when we actually look on the ground, who are the implementers, who are the people actually delivering services, there are so few women. I think CARE is probably the only organisation that has a female coordinator in our humanitarian unit. And for me, women's leadership is absolutely critical if we're going to move forward and actually have an effective GBV response. So those are some of our key challenges that we're facing.
Well, those are significant challenges, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that we often talk the talk about these issues, but don't have women actually in decision-making roles locally to carry out some of this work. You're going to have the last word with us today in this program, and I wonder if you could give us a call to action in a way. What kind of help can those who are listening to you bring to address the situation in Tigray that we have heard about in the last hour?
Well, I think one key issue is around accountability, and that has been referenced by previous panelists. And for us, we welcome the joint the joint investigation that's going to be conducted by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission to undertake the rights investigation. This is an important first step and we welcome it. However, at this point, what we need are facts, and those facts need to be made public. And currently, there are many people who are naysayers or saying that the situation in Tigray has been overemphasized or it's been sensationalized. I do not believe that that is the truth. And therefore, if we are to advocate and we are to see a change, then we need the facts. And that commission and that report, like has been referenced by Honourable Pramila, we need to ensure that it is made public and those atrocities are held to account. That is one of the key ways in which we can ensure that continuation and perpetration of violence is called to an end. We need the action on that, and we need commitments from government and from other UN actors to actually say, this is what we need to end this now, and that we need to hold those perpetrators accountable, and they need to be brought to public justice.
Thank you so much. And that was very clear. And thank you for spelling that out. I want to thank you, Esther, and your colleague, Mekon, for all that you're doing, for all that CARE is doing. It matters greatly. So keep up the good work. I know the challenges are significant. Thank you all for joining us today. Our program is coming to a close, but the conflict in Tigray, sadly, is far from over. And the humanitarian situation, as you've been hearing, is rapidly deteriorating. Women there are doing all they can to help their communities, but they are extremely vulnerable, both to attacks in Tigray and in refugee camps. We hope each of you listening will do what you can to respond to what you've heard, and do all you can in whatever position you hold to help ensure that the situation in Tigray will not be ignored. We truly must act urgently to support those who are suffering from this horrific violence. And each of our speakers have said that in one way or another today. And I want to thank each of them, some under very, very considerably risk situations, to say what they said. To Special Representative Patton, to Ambassador Byrne-Nason, to Faye Solomon, Esther Watts and Mekon Efewerk, and to Dr. Tedros and Dr. Khatib. And I want to thank our team at Georgetown, Ali Smith and Jess Keller, for their considerable efforts in bringing this program, putting this program together for today. It has been a daunting task, but I hope it has informed all of us and that it will motivate us to do more on this issue. Make your voices heard and respond to the call to action. Thank you all very much.